All right, and we're just going to give it a few beats as people come in and get situated in front of their computers. We have people rolling in now. Just take another few minutes. Thanks for being here, everyone. All right, we're going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to P&P Live. My name is Heidi, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at Politics and Prose. Thank you for joining us and tuning into this virtual format where we continue to bring authors and new books to you. I have the pleasure of hosting our event this afternoon, and I'm delighted to welcome our guests, Michelle Duster and Laura Freeman. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. You can click the link that we will drop into the chat box to get your own copy of Ida B. Wells' Voice of Truth. And we also do have some signed book plates that will be available while supplies last. If you have a question for our guests, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. If you're joining us from school, teachers, please add your student's first name, the school name, and grade to your question so we can give you a shout out. Just a quick reminder that the chat box has been disabled. Please only use the Q&A section for questions for our guests. At the end of the presentation, our guests will have time to answer some of your questions. You can also upvote the questions you like and want most answered. Now onto the event that you're waiting for. Michelle Duster has worked for over 30 years in various mediums to highlight the positive contributions of women and African Americans to the United States. She has written articles and books, worked on monuments, markers, murals, films, concerts, and film festivals, all to tell stories that have frequently been omitted, skewed, or marginalized. She is determined to help current and future generations be exposed to and inspired by more inclusive and truthful representation. She is the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. Her recent works include Ida B. the Queen and the Anthologies, Impact, Personal Portraits of Activism, and Michelle Obama's Impact on African American Women and Girls. Originally from New York, Laura Freeman now lives in Atlanta with her husband and 2 children. She received her BFA from the School of Visual Arts and began her career working for various editorial clients. She has illustrated over 30 children's books, including the 2019 Coretta Scott King Honor Book, Hidden Figures, the Nikki and Deja book series, and Fancy Party Gowns, the story of fashion designer Anne Cole Lowe. Thank you both for being here.
Well, thanks for having us.
I'm really pleased that you are here today. So before we start the conversation, I was hoping, Michelle, could you tell us a little bit about your great-grandmother Ida and a little bit about the book?
Sure. My great-grandmother Ida B. Wells was a pioneer in data journalism. She also was a co-owner of several newspapers. She was involved in the suffrage movement. She was involved in the civil rights activism, and towards the end of her life, she got involved in social work. So she actually had several sort of chapters in her life. She also was a mother of 4 children, a wife, and very involved in her community. So she was a very multidimensional woman. And the book, Ida B. Wells' Voice of Truth, is a children's picture book that gives the overview, basically, of her life, with the focus on helping, hopefully, inspire young people to know how one person can make a difference by speaking up, by speaking truth to power, and by highlighting and addressing inequality and injustice whenever they encounter it.
Thank you. Thank you for that overview. So for those people in the audience who are just starting to learn about Ida, maybe they've had a chance to look through the book, but they haven't had the depth or breadth to look at her yet. Can you maybe talk about any misconceptions that there might be about her life or work?
One of the things that I find interesting, and I have attempted, really have tried hard in the writing that I've done about my great-grandmother to help humanize her.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who are familiar with her life and story rightfully so, have an enormous amount of respect for her, and they are inspired by her. But I think sometimes they forget that she was human. And so I have tried to help people recognize that she had all the same range of emotions that we all do today. She had fear, she had doubt, she had questioning of, where she fit in the world. She felt alone at times. She had insecurities. And so to me, that makes her a fully rounded human being, instead of this sort of superhero who never had had any doubts about herself. And I think that's really important for young people to know that she had the same, kind of journey in learning who she was that they might be going through.
Yeah, like you said, it makes her so much more human, and you can empathize with, all the emotions that she had, and she still managed to do so much with her life. But yeah, a fully formed, feeling human being. Before we move to Laura in just a second, I was wondering, Michelle, did you want to read a little bit from the book? Do you want to show us some of your favorite pages or read some pages from the book?
Sure, I can share a few pages. This is the pages that starts when it talks about her starting in her writing journey. So it says, so here's the page. Can you all see? Okay. So it says, Ida also began writing for church newsletters. She wrote about social and political issues at the time. One day in 1884, when Ida was in her early 20s, she was riding a train when the conductor asked her to move from the ladies' car to the colored car, which doubled as the smoking car. She refused and was thrown off the train. Rather than cower to the powers that be, she wrote about the incident in the newspaper and sued the Chesapeake, Ohio and Southwestern Railroad. She won the case and was awarded $500. Though it was appealed all the way to the Tennessee Supreme Court. Almost 2.5 years later, the ruling was overturned in favor of the railroad, and Ida B. Wells was accused of harassing the company. And so this is the illustrations.
Love that picture.
While still teaching, Ida became co-owner of the Memphis Free Speech newspaper and built up a following as a writer. She expressed her frustration with separate and unequal school systems and wrote about it, then lost her teaching job. So Ida got busy traveling around the area selling subscriptions for the newspaper. And I love this illustration of the newspaper pages flying. And then notice the little hat that she's wearing. So cute. And that's from one of the pictures of her. Okay. My great-grandmother's life completely changed on March 9th, 1892. 3 of her enterprising friends who owned a grocery store, which rivaled a white-owned store, were lynched. Ida B. Wells knew that her friends, Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and William Stewart, were only guilty of being economic rivals to a white-owned business. So this illustration shows, just the drama and that experienced for the community and her trauma of dealing with that loss. So I'll stop there and let Jochen find out what happens next by reading the book.
Won't give anything away. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Michelle. Laura, we would love to have you talk a little bit about the illustrations. So I've read in interviews that you've done that you do a lot of research on your subject before you start drawing. Looking through photographs, reading the history of the time, even looking at the neighborhoods where people have lived. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about the process that you used for this book.
Well, for this book, I'm sorry to say that I didn't know who Ida Wells was before I started. I mean, my Black history was not good when I was growing up. So that's what's so great about working on these kinds of books. I learn as much as the kids reading them do. For this particular one, I started on the internet. I looked and I read in Wikipedia. I just went through everything that I could find on the internet, photographs. There were hundreds and hundreds of images that had quotes by her. And the quotes were really amazing. I mean, she really was a writer, and she was just such an amazing person. It just blew me away that I didn't know who she was before starting. I used to go to the library and find, picture library and find pictures. And I don't even know if they do that anymore. I don't even know if the New York Public Library has a picture file anymore. But I looked through the online version of it, and I just scoured everything I could find from the history, the time period, what the clothes looked like when, during her time period, and the typewriters, because, she was a writer, the lamps, the other people, what a newsstand used to look like back then. So I just found hundreds of pictures, and if I could share my screen, I can show you some of the research that I do. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So let me look at this is I just go on Google and I just download photographs of everything that I think I might need. I read through the manuscript over and over again, and I find pictures of suffragettes. I'll show you. I have newsstands. I have photographs of newsstands, old ones, new ones, pictures, from all different eras. I have, let's see, some of here's pictures. I find photos of suffragettes. This was an old newspaper picture of Ida. It's very pixelated. It's probably a very tiny image, but you can get the idea of what they wore. And I just go to other sources to find out what the colors were, and and what her here's some others. Some of them are so tiny, but so that's where it starts. Before I start doing any kind of drawing, I just immerse myself in what the time period was and what her life might have been like. So
right. Thank you. And I know people always are curious, do the author and the illustrator get to talk at all during the process? What was the situation in this book?
Oh, not at all. I've heard from different publishers that they actually purposely try to keep you apart because they want to see what you're going to bring to it, a different perspective. And the author is supplying the words. They want to see how you visualize it. And if they feel like the author is dictating it too much, it might lose that second layer.
Got it. And Michelle, when you did see the book for the first time, what was your reaction?
I was amazed at how intricate, and multi-layered the images are, the paintings. I mean, because even just say, for instance, the cover, right? I mean, it has Ida, but then it has all of these sort of layers behind it of some of her newspaper pamphlet, or the pamphlets that she wrote, or the newspaper articles. And so it's almost like three-dimensional in a way. And so the illustrations kind of almost fill in the gaps of what I could not, write everything because it's a children's picture book. But even I loved this idea that Laura came up with, to have sort of a scrapbook looking page. And so it makes it look very sort of personal to me. And so it was just really interesting to me to see how she approached the work and added layers visually that were that I couldn't really put in in words.
Right.
So it sort of adds another dimension to the story by looking at the pictures.
Right.
That scrapbook page, it was since Michelle is her great-granddaughter, it just seemed appropriate that it would be something that was personal to her.
Right, because Michelle says, I think when she's talking about one of the pages, I'm going to show this page because I like it too. I mean, one of the people in that picture is actually Michelle's grandmother. Is that right?
Right. The little girl sitting on the floor was my grandmother.
Right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Oh, amazing. So as we follow Ida's journey, Michelle, through the book, she has all of these things that happen to her. She's responding to all of these like injustices. But do you think there was one particular event that happened to her that really changed the course of her life and what she ended up doing?
Yes, absolutely. I think the murder of her friends was the absolute turning point in her life. Because, so just to give a little context, she was a teacher. A lot of people forget that about her. They think of her as a journalist and civil rights activist and a suffragist. But before all of that, she was a teacher. And, hands off to all teachers, hats off to all teachers. I mean, she knew the struggle of being in the classroom and dealing with all of the things that teachers deal with. And so before her friends were killed, she had been teaching, and then she criticized the school system. And so then she lost her teaching job. And she made the decision to focus all of her energy on building up the newspaper that she co-owned at the time. I mean, that was definitely a turning point, which resonates with me. I mean, how many people have lost their jobs and then they make a decision on what they're going to do, what their next, step will be in their career. So that was, definitely a turning point for her to be like, I'm done. I'm not applying for any more jobs. I'm going to do me. Yeah. So that was fine. But then when it came to the turning point was, she was happy. I've read, now you talk about Laura's research. I mean, I've read through, Ida's, luckily she kept a journal during her early to mid 20s. So I read through that. I mean, she was happily, for me, she was a writer. And so I've read through all of her writing, her autobiography, all of her pamphlets. I read through newspapers at the time that she lived through, and all of that in order to get a sense of like what her life was like. And she had lost her parents when she was only 16, and she was living in Memphis as a single woman. And Thomas Moss in particular was a really good friend of hers. And so for her, to me, when I think about it, it's like family, people talk about family today, where friends that are sort of substitute as family. And so for her to lose him in that way, in that violent way, absolutely changed everything about her life. And I feel very strongly that when things happen to you personally, I think the fact that she knew Thomas Moss so well is a huge part of why it became a personal crusade for her, because it was a personal loss. And she just, unleashed, enormous criticism of, the system, the community, the lack of protection that African Americans had, the lawlessness, on and on, to the point where she received death threats, and she ultimately, was exiled from the South. And so everything about her life changed after her friends were killed.
Yeah. Wow. Did I read somewhere that she was Thomas Moss's daughter's godmother? Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
She was close enough to him to be, with a godmother, if you take it seriously, godparents are supposed to be those who will take care of your child if anything happens to you. And so, you can't get much closer than that when it comes to having a friendship with somebody else, especially because, like I said, she was single, living on her own in Memphis. And so I'm sure she had formed a family of friends.
Right.
I know you say she was very human, but that's just like incredibly courageous thing to do back then, to speak out like that. I mean, it's, and the death threats, and it's really mind-boggling when you think about it.
Yeah, I just look at it the same way, and just really briefly, I look at it the same way as, people who started Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or you look at some more current people, who started like Black Lives Matter or other, movements. Most of the time, if you really look at it, there's a pattern of it, something personal happening, and they're just driven. I think sometimes people just don't even think about what can happen to them. They're just like, something has to be done. We have to speak out. We have to change this. And, somebody wants to threaten me, go ahead, have at it. We'll figure it out. And it seemed like that's what happened to her. That's my way of sort of analyzing
Yeah, no,
her
she channeled
motivation.
all of that, anger and just heartache into making that change. Yeah, absolutely. Laura, I just want to talk to you a little bit about, your books. You've done a lot of books that are set in these historical contexts. So when you were working on Ida's book, were there any scenes that you struggled with recreating in the book?
Well, the lynching scene in particular was difficult, and because when you think of lynching, what I think of is a noose, hanging. And I initially, when I did that sketch, it was a struggle to do it in such a way that, it is a children's book. You don't want it to be just horrific looking, but at the same time you want to show the emotion of what's happening. And I initially did have it in a noose in the foreground, and it was the editors and the editor and art director that came back to me and said that, well, lynching wasn't always done that way. It signified any kind of murder that was done against Black people. So they had me remove the noose, but if I can show you that page, let's see, I think I had my initial sketch, was just her close up with the, did I share it?
I think when you had that for the first screen, all the different pieces, yeah, I think it's in there.
Yeah. So this was the original sketch, and that's when they came back to me and told me that it wasn't.
Actually, Laura, we're not seeing your sketches. We're just seeing some documents.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, hang on a second. Let me stop share and go back again. Sorry.
That's okay. While you're doing that, I just want to remind people that you can definitely jump in and put your questions in the queue.
Are you saying it now? Are you saying?
I don't see it right now.
Yeah.
Are you seeing it?
I see it.
I do. Okay. Oh, I see it. Yep. There we go.
Okay. All right. So this was the original sketch, and which was corrected, and I'll show you the final image because it's hard to see when you're holding a book up. It gets a lot of glare and stuff. Whoops. So that was one that was kind of difficult.
Right. Okay. Thank you. As I was saying, I just want to remind people that they can definitely jump in and put questions in the queue. I know we have a lot of schools that probably have a lot of questions, but I do have a few more questions for both of you. So Michelle, you briefly mentioned all of the roles that Ida had in her life. She has a very full life. Do you think, just kind of out of the research that you did, do you think one was particularly close to her heart?
That's difficult for me to answer because she seemed to be the type of person, even when you read through her autobiography, she kind of sought issues to respond to. Like, she would read the newspaper. She and her husband, after they got married in 1895, and for those who are interested, she got married at age 33, which even with some people today, that would be considered older. But for her to be somebody who was born in 1862, to get married at the age of 33 was like ancient. It was like she was a grandmother or something. But her husband, my great-grandfather, was an attorney, and they would read the newspaper, the way that people back in the day when people would read the newspaper while they're drinking their coffee, whatever. And so they would read about something that happened and like, oh my God, we have to respond to this. Who do we call? Who do we write? So it seemed like, in addition to things happening personally to her or people that she knew, if she read about something that she found outrageous, then she would try to figure out how to get involved. So that just seemed to be like who she was. Like, she wanted to address, the myriad of issues that were very challenging. And I just want to say really quickly that, her lifespan from the Civil War, because she was born in 1862, She was born into slavery in Mississippi. And lucky for her, the Civil War ended in 1865, so she didn't grow up into slavery, but she would have if things would have turned out differently in the war. And then she died in the middle of the Depression. So if you think about that period, that 68 period of our country's history, there were so many battles to fight, from being property, being born as piece of property or, deemed that way, to women having the right to vote. I mean, there were so many things to fight for. She was in the middle of all of it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to stop my questions because I see that we have at least, we have 10 questions in the queue now. So I want to jump into these questions and let the kids ask some things. Let's see. The first question is from Joaquin Flores. What did the author make decisions about what to include, considering the word limitations posed by the picture book format? How did you decide what to put in, Michelle?
Well, I definitely chose to highlight the main turning points in her life that impacted who she, became as a woman. And I also wanted to try to help people understand as much as they could the emotional impact of the different sort of key points in her life that would help people understand why she did, what drove her, and what impacted her, with the goal of inspiring the reader to feel that they can relate to her, and also potentially, take on some of the things that she did and feel that nobody has to try to be like Ida, but to see that they can be empowered by using some of her tactics.
Yeah, that your voice matters. Yeah. We have several questions in here from Merch Elementary School, 2nd grade. Let's see. Let's go to the first one. How old was Ida before she passed away? How old did she live to be? They would like to know.
She was 68 years old. And some people think she was 69 because, her birthday was in July and she died in March. So if you just look at the years without looking at the months, then, people think it was 69, but she died 3 months before she turned 69. 3 or 4 months. I can't do the math. March, July, whatever. 4 months. She died 4 months before she turned 69.
Got it. The kids are really interested in just the family history. So what, again, the Merch 2nd grade, what, based on your research that you've done, Michelle, what do you think kept Ida going?
I think, I didn't really incorporate this into the book because there's a lot, to kind of digest when it comes to all of our history, all of our country's history. But it's important that Ida came of age during Reconstruction, which was a period of our country's history from 1865 at the end of the Civil War to 1877. That 12-year period of time in our country's history was extremely important in who Ida became, because that was a period of our history where formerly enslaved people got the right to become formally educated. Before that, when slavery was still an institution, enslaved people could not read. They could not go to school. They could not become educated. She had the right to become educated. Her father had the right to vote as a result of Reconstruction amendments to the Constitution. So she grew up in a politically active family with parents that were taking advantage of all of the things and the newly found rights that formerly enslaved people had. And so to have those opportunities and then for them to be rolled back, because there was this post-Reconstruction period that there was this backlash, and we kind of are seeing a little bit of that today, where rights are taken away. And I think that's what motivated her.
Yeah, Thank you. I think this is a question from Jackie, and actually I want to pose it to both of you because you both worked on this book and you have, obviously, Michelle, your history and your family connection, but I'm sure that Laura was also inspired. So Jack wants to know, what ways can we continue Ida's legacy? Laura, do you want to start?
I think like what Michelle is doing is just keeping, writing about it, talking about it, learning as much as you can, is the best way to start. And Michelle, kudos to Michelle for what she's done. It's just, just amazing, just fabulous.
Thank you. I just think when it comes to continuing her legacy, I just sum it up as speak up, because that's really what she was doing in every aspect of the work that she was doing, not only with the journalism, but she spoke up, but then she also addressed issues. And I'll give one example with the Negro Fellowship League, which is a part of her work that is not as well known. But there was some people know about the Great Migration that happened where, millions of African Americans left the South and came to the northern part of the country. There were two different waves right after most of it was like after the wars, World War I and World War II. And so for her, it was World War I where there was this massive, migration, and people had a hard time adjusting to the northern part of the country. And so she and her husband, my great-grandfather, started a rooming house to give people who were Southern migrants a place to sleep and a way to adjust to the North and find jobs. And so she didn't just see a problem, she tried to find a solution.
That's actually a good segue into a question again from Merch, second grade. They want to know where Ida lived.
She lived in several places. She was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi, which is a small town. If you ever happen to be in northern Mississippi, it's actually not very far from Memphis. And so then she moved from there, from Holly Springs to Memphis, which is where she really started her journalism career and her civil rights activism. After she got exiled kicked out of Memphis, she settled in New York City, Brooklyn specifically. And then she settled and spent the rest of her life in Chicago.
Got it. Thank you. I'm going to go to Merch second grade again. And their question for both of you. When did you start writing the book? How long did it take you to put the book together? Laura, do you want to start with your portion?
My portion is probably a lot shorter than Michelle's. I think I was approached by the publisher in 2020, sometime in 2020, and it didn't start immediately. They sent me the manuscript, and it's over a period of months that it starts with the sketch. I feed them the sketches, and they come back with revisions. And then after I feed them the second set of sketches that have been revised, then we go to finishes. So it's a matter of months as opposed to what Michelle is probably working on her whole life.
Michelle, how about you?
Well, for me, there was just a lag time between when I submitted the manuscript and I think when Laura probably received the manuscript. It sounds like, because I submitted the manuscript in 2018.
Oh.
Yeah, and well, like the end of 2018, early 2019. So it sounds like there was a little bit of time between when I submitted it and when you were approached or when you received it. But as far as me writing the manuscript, the book started, the original material for the book was combed from an article that I wrote. And so for the article, I don't know how long it took me to write it, because my writing process is sort of weird. Like I think about what I'm going to write for a very long time before I actually write. So the writing process might seem fast,
Yeah.
but it was like in my head, you know, for a while. And I've been like that ever since I was in college. Even when I had to write papers for college, I would just think and think and think and think. And then I would just sit down like at the last minute and write it all out at once.
It looks like it's all easy and it's happening, but it's been percolating for a long
It's
time.
been percolating and marinating for a while.
Yeah. Well, this is a question from Sheridan School. They want to know, what was your favorite part about writing the book? And then Laura, what was your favorite part about the illustrations? Michelle, do you want to take that?
My favorite part of writing the book was just to find ways to make, to kind of create a rhythm with the words. And so even when I was writing it, I had in my head sort of like a little bit of a, not a song, but but I kind of had a little beat in my head when I was writing it. And I was like, she wrote, she spoke, she traveled, she this, that. And I was like, had to, you know, I was trying to like repeat words a little bit so that I was thinking about if somebody read this out loud or as a poem or something, then it would have this like rhythm to it. Yeah, so that was kind of fun for me.
Oh, neat. I love that little insight. Laura, how about you? Did you have a favorite part of working on the illustrations?
Well, you know, getting started and doing the research and learning about her was really fun and exciting and gave me ideas, and especially the quotes. All her quotes, really, that it was fun to incorporate the words into a lot of the pictures. Can I share some of the screen?
Yeah, please. Yes.
Let's see. So here is one of the end papers with one of her quotes.
Yeah.
And another one.
I love that one. Can I say one of the things that I loved about how Laura incorporated the quotes in the artwork is it looks like it's handwritten.
Yeah.
You know, so it has, to me, that sort of personal touch to it where, you know what I mean? It's not like, it doesn't look like a typewriter.
Yeah, it looks like a hand.
I love that about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's interesting because this page looks different than the final version, Laura.
Yeah, the colors changed.
Uh-huh.
The colors changed.
Yeah.
Actually, if you look at some of the initial, these were like the initial cover sketches, and I did have, you know, a lot of the words, they had like her handwriting from her, you know, from what I found online of her journals, and different, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving too, but if you look in the background is like all the different articles that she, from her, and this one actually had writing all over the whole thing. So things, you know, I did, the writing was there in the back of my head the whole time. Yeah. There was another one with the typewriter. So things, you know, things go back and forth a lot. Let's see, did this one have, yeah, this was one of the.
Oh, is that her handwriting in the back?
Yeah, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So Michelle, are her journals available to read? Is that something that you could find online? Can anybody have access to those?
Her autobiography, I mean, her diary is available at the University of Chicago special collections. Oh. So it is available. I'm sure it's digitized at this point.
A question from Katie. She asks, when you were researching and writing this book, did you discover something about her that you didn't already know?
Well, there's a lot of things that I know about her that are not in the book because there was, I mean, it's just, you know, it's impossible. Her life was so full. But one of the things that I loved learning about her, which it just to me summarizes her, like, if you want to call it courage and her audacity, was she protested against a different lynching that happened in Houston during World War I. and of soldiers that were killed by the U.S. government, and that she was investigated by the FBI. And I don't know or not if she knew that she was being surveilled. She mentioned that the officers came to her office in Chicago, but she didn't give any indication to me as a reader if she, anticipated that or not. But the way she told the story was that she was absolutely not intimidated at all, and she basically dared them to arrest her. And to me, that is just so ballsy. It was like, I don't care what you all say, you can arrest me. I'm okay going to jail because this is what I stand for. And it was like she just dared them to do anything. And she stood up to two different United States presidents, William S. McKinley in 1898. She went to the storm to the White House. And this is how long that we as a country have struggled to have anti-lynching legislation, because in 1898, Ida B. Wells went to William S. McKinley to demand that there be anti-lynching legislation as a result of a postmaster, Fraser Baker, who was lynched. He was a federal employee, obviously, and so anyway, that's a long story. But she was not intimidated at all by the challenging sitting president and challenging the United States government to, what are they going to do? What, are you going to arrest me? I'm not scared. I'm not scared of you.
Right.
And I just love that story.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Well, that's actually a good segue into another question from Sheridan School. I'm sure you have thought about this, Michelle, but the kids want to know, if you could meet Ida, what would you say to her?
You know what? I mean, as I was growing up, especially once I entered my early 20s, after I finished college and I was starting my career and trying to figure out who I was and where I fit in. And I always felt like I was slightly different than most of my friends, because they were all like corporate and, or lawyers or this or that. And I'm like, I don't want to do any of this. I want to do something, but I didn't know what. And so it's not so much what I would say to her as much as I wanted to always know if Ida felt the same as I did, as far as not really kind of fitting into social norms or social expectations. If she, how did she handle feeling that she was sort of going against the grain, because that's what I felt I was doing. And then even when it came to her, with social expectations of you have to get married and have children, and this is what women do. And, and then some, even now, today in 2022, women who are not married without kids are like questioned, and what's wrong with you? You're too picky. I mean, all of these kind of things. And I can imagine during her time, it was even worse, as far as sort of vilifying women. And so I always wanted to get in her head and how did she feel? How did she defy all of these social expectations and sort of live for herself, live for her own truth, and follow her own instincts on how she wanted to live her life? And to me, that was inspiring.
And that's a lesson we can all take, right? Like, how do you live your best life? We have time for just maybe one or two more questions, but Eileen Johnson is curious, what does the B in her name stand for?
Bell, B-E-L-L.
Oh, B, nice, lovely. A question from Jack. He was wondering, do either of you have any projects coming up that you can share with us? Laura, do you want to start?
Let me think. What can I share? Oh, there's a couple that I don't think I can share yet. Hang on a second. Maybe I'll show you a couple of pictures. I think this one changed the words. The title has changed. There's one about Savion Glover. And it started out being called Boy Meets Groove, but now it's called This Is Tamp. And it's really fun because I love dance.
Yeah. For the kids who don't know, Savion Glover is a very famous tap dancer.
So let's see if I can show you any. So I won't zoom in a lot because maybe since I don't have permission, but you'll get an idea of what the book looks like.
Nice.
But lots of fun. Lots of fun. I'm not sure when the publication date is yet.
We'll look forward to that one. Thank you. And I think we have time for one last question, just because I think I want to bring up the importance of, newspapers and having that institution still, really important in our democracy. Do you think that, or do you, Michelle, do you know if Ida had a favorite newspaper somebody wants to know?
I would assume it was hers.
I would hope so.
I mean, she was the co-owner of the Memphis Free Speech. And so why wouldn't that be her favorite paper?
I agree.
And then she also became co-owner of the New York Age with T. Thomas Fortune. And ultimately, when she got married to Ferdinand Barnett, he owned the first Black-owned newspaper in Chicago called The Conservator. And so they basically transferred ownership from him to her. But she was an avid reader. I mean, it's very obvious when you read through her journal in particular. She read everything she could get her hands on. And that's important to know, students. Yes. When they say like readers are leaders. So the more you read, the more you expand your mind, the more you know about what's going on in the world, and it helps shape your your worldview and who you are and where you fit in.
Absolutely. That is such a wonderful note to end on. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here today, both of you. Thank you for sharing the beautiful images and the stories of Ida B. Wells. It is so important to know a woman like this has such leadership and such a vision and such strength, and was a human being too. It's like a real person. So thank you for putting a face and a history and a story, especially family stories, to her name. So thank you both so much for being here today.
No,
thank you for having us.
Thank you. You can still buy the book. The link is in the chat box. So hopefully you'll get a chance to buy your own copy of this amazing book. And please feel free to stop by the store and just keep following us on Politics and Prose and join us for other events. So again, thank you both so much for being here. We hope to see you in person in the future.
Absolutely. That would be great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.